Ryomen Sukuna is the strongest sorcerer of all time. Alright, that's it, wrap it up. Despite this being common knowledge inside of the JJK universe, it's clearly not in the fandom. In today's video, we'll go over exactly that. What's up guys, Gamblrr here, and today we'll be figuring out how strong Ryomen Sukuna truly is. Look, I'm currently scripting this and I'm expecting an absolute behemoth of a video. So to ease the pain from the editing, you gotta do something for me. Make sure to like and enjoy the video. That's really it. And drop a sub if you're new. Our story starts in the first chapter of the series before we actually even see the man himself. Sukuna's fingers by itself starts up a conversation by JJK fans. It's one surrounding what actually happened over the 1000 years since Sukuna gave up his life in the original Heian era. I personally don't think any take is really dumb per se. I think the way it was conveyed to us just wasn't clear enough, most likely due to translation issues. The first thing I want to go over is the idea that Sukuna has 1000 years of experience because he was incarnated multiple times before the current story. This idea comes from Sukuna telling Jogo that he's not bad compared to those he fought over the last 1000 years, and also the other statements vaguely saying that Sukuna has been traveling through ages. Again, I can't really blame this line of thinking because the wording being used is really dumb, but also let's think about it. You're telling me for 1000 years not a single person ate Sukuna's finger other than some random cursed spirits? Yeah, it does sound crazy, but when you read between the lines, you find out that this is literally what happened. Kenjaku was the one who turned Sukuna into the fingers we all know about today, and the reason he did was because 1000 years from the moment he would transform him, there would be a culling games held, and that's what Kenjaku prepared for the entire time. It's likely that Kenjaku just hid Sukuna's fingers until it was time to create the best plans for chaos during the modern era. Kenjaku was the one who clearly orchestrated the finger ending up in Yuji's school and Yuji ending up as Sukuna's vessel. Heck, the entire reason Yuji exists is because he was supposed to be Sukuna's vessel. I would like to refer to chapter 158 because it kind of confirms what I'm talking about. Yuji receives a message from Kogane outside of any of the culling game barriers, and Megumi is confused on why he's counted as a player already. Then Yuji thinks back to what Kenjaku said about him making people ingest cursed objects just like him, and that he made a ton of vows with each and every one of them. And so Yuji speculates that one of the people Kenjaku made a vow with was Sukuna, which we know is the case because Sukuna and his vessel Yuji is already a player from the culling games. Going back to the root of the problem, I looked at the anime's translation of the conversation with Jogo and it said 8,000 years ago, so to be very honest, I'm just going to blame the translators on this one. With that being said, Sukuna only lived one full life of fighting, turned into some fingers, and came back for like however long JJK was until the end. The conversation about the fingers doesn't end there though, because sure, Sukuna might not have incarnated multiple times throughout the 1000 years, but there's a conversation to be had about what Sukuna was doing during those 1000 years. In chapter 2, Gojo tries to destroy Sukuna's finger with what seems to be red, and the finger doesn't even get scratched. Gojo tells Yuji that you literally cannot destroy it because it's that powerful of a curse. Then after, he says that with each passing day, they get even stronger and that they don't have anyone who can properly seal the fingers at the moment. This is the statement that sparked another dialogue about modern era Sukuna's strength compared to his Heian era counterpart. The assumption is that Sukuna gets stronger as each day passes, and it's been 1000 years, so surely he's like 1000 years stronger. However you want to quantify that. I don't think that was the point of the dialogue though. In context, Gojo's talking about the curse making the fingers basically indestructible, and I think Gojo's saying here that as each day passes, the fingers get stronger and stronger, meaning it gets even harder to seal, let alone destroy. Another dialogue about the fingers is something I found super interesting, and it was something my guy Lilo brought my attention to. At the time of hearing it, I actually knew the full answer, but I was gatekeeping the information because I wanted to make a video on it. So now let's talk about it completely. The conversation surrounds the assumption that during the entire 1000 years, Sukuna was awake, conscious, and probably even just chilling in his innate domain. Before I just say the complete answer, the other things that supported this theory were both Choso and Ryu. Choso is a death painting womb. He and his like 9 other siblings were all created by Kenjaku in his very twisted and weird experiments. We actually see how they look as they were kept away and hidden in their own tubes. In there, we find out that the entire 150 years they were sealed away, Choso was actually refining his curse technique, and that's how he created Supernova. Beyond that, I'm pretty sure it's said that Choso and his brothers kept each other company during their time away, so it would be very safe to assume they were at the very least conscious to a certain extent. The main thing people would say in counter to this is the fact that Choso is a death painting and Sukuna is a cursed object, and that they most definitely work differently. This is logical to say, to be honest, but we'll get back into that topic in a second because I have to explain another thing. Ryu has a statement that says his eyes reflected 400 years of hunger. This is obviously in reference to how during his era, he didn't go for the biggest meals, and so getting into the culling games, he traversed 400 years to finally get his fair share, exactly like Sukuna. Reminder that Sukuna's method of incarnation is like a more advanced version of all the other incarnated sorcerers in the culling games. It's literally stated that Kenjaku turned all of them into cursed objects. That's how Yorozu, Ryomen, Kajimo, Ryu, all of these characters are here currently. They were turned into cursed objects, and then Kenjaku forcibly made certain vessels ingest them. So the immediate response to the Ryu statement would be that it's a hyperbole and for dramatic effect, which is also logical, but now we have to go over the actual answer. Yes, Sukuna and the other culling game characters were actually conscious during their time waiting for the culling games. First off, going back to the Choso thing, he's basically just an incarnated sorcerer like the others, except when Mahito force-fed them to the vessels, they immediately transform into their original bodies. I think this is what Oro did. There's no way there was some random human vessel who had pink skin. I think it's pretty obvious that the Uro we see is the Uro from the Heian era, but this doesn't apply to everyone. This is not Kachimo. This is. But why would he transform into this old guy with a sickness? It made no sense, so he kept the form of his vessel. Same thing for Ryu. I don't think bro was messing with the way his hair was compared to his new vessel. Anyways, the nail in the coffin is the fact that Choso is the reference for how Sukuna and Megami's souls interact. In chapter 251, we get a flashback of Yuta, Maki, Angel, Yuji, and Choso all discussing plans to get rid of Sukuna from Megami's body. According to Yuki's notes, even if souls are mixed together, they never actually become one. However, Choso uses himself as an example opposite of what Yuki claimed, saying he can't even feel a trace of the original body's soul he's inhabiting. I mean, the next page just confirms what I'm saying, as Yuji says it's most likely due to the insane gap of cursed energy between cursed objects and non-sorcerers. So yeah, a death painting womb and an in quotations cursed object are basically synonymous, or more accurately, in Choso's case, when fully incarnated they are synonymous. This isn't the only reason I claim they're conscious though, it's actually because I'm a weirdo and I was reading through the entire fanbook. In Sukuna's entry, it's asked by a reader what Sukuna does when he's not taking over Yuji's body, and here's the golden answer. He's spacing out. Sukuna became a master of doing it after 1000 years. We actually see this multiple times throughout the series, and it was actually one of my favorite things from Sukuna. When he's getting insulted by someone, the guy doesn't even pay attention or care. He just spaces out and is signaled by the ellipses. During the entire 1000 years he was waiting for the culling games, sure, he was conscious, but he was spacing out for most, if not the entire time. This is why I think maybe Choso was refining his curse technique, because he has no reason to space out, he has his brother's company, but Sukuna literally has no one, and also, what the heck is he refining? He lived a full life, like I said, and in that life, he gained ridiculous techniques and strength, so no, I don't actually think it's fair to assume Sukuna from the Heian era is any different in overall strength to a hypothetical full power modern day true form Sukuna. The only difference would have to be the things he learned in the modern day, and also the fact that he's an incarnated sorcerer, so he has a vessel. After typing like 2 pages of script going over Sukuna's fingers, I think it's time we get into what Sukuna actually does. In the Gojo video, I had myself go over Gojo's progression in strength from a kid to a teen to an adult, and obviously we don't have a flashback for Sukuna, but we can still somewhat create the same kind of vibe, so let's get into it, starting off with Baby Sukuna. Yes, I said Baby Sukuna, and I have to because we actually know some things about Sukuna and his childhood. In chapter 257, Sukuna reveals to us that he was actually supposed to be born as a twin, but because of his mother's blight, he ate his brother in the womb. This isn't stated to be the reason Sukuna has twice the number of eyes, mouths, and arms as the regular human, but it's pretty clear that that was the reason. And because of this, Sukuna grew up as a cursed, unwanted wretch, a child persecuted and resented because of his very existence. This is what he tells Kashimo and what Mahito says about him. And so the absolute demon we see today, the one going around killing people for his own interests, is a result of that. According to Sukuna, he lived in the only manner he knew, and that manner is one where he does what's best for him and no one else, since he didn't have anyone else. And it worked. Sukuna was hailed as a literal deity. He killed who he wanted to kill and spared those who gave offerings to him. We know this because of like the single showing of the Heian era during Yorozu's reign as one of the strongest. And so it's safe to assume that Sukuna sharpened his skills throughout his younger years to take revenge on the world that resented him for no good reason. That's enough of that though, so let's get into the first and weakest Sukuna we see, Finger Sukuna. This guy exists for like a couple pages, but we see a couple things. First off, Sukuna's able to just one-shot the curse that had Megumi stressing, and casually at that. It's really odd what he does here because it seems like he doesn't use his curse technique in the way we know it. He swings his hand at the curse and it looks like bro just killed it with air or something, but we know it was a curse technique because you can't exercise a curse without Jujutsu. He actually does the exact same thing against Gojo when he was trying to eliminate him. Anyways, in his fight with Gojo, Sukuna tries to attack him and Gojo uses his teleportation to appear behind Sukuna. This gives the bliss effect and even Sukuna's confused on what even happened, claiming he's fast, but there's something else. In the anime, Gojo beats the crap out of Sukuna even worse and just embarrasses him, but in the manga, it's literally just one punch from Gojo after he caught him off guard. This is something consistent literally throughout the series. When Sukuna doesn't expect a blue boost to Gojo's speed, he's temporarily blissed and then Gojo can get an attack off. That's what happened in Sukuna's domain. Anyways, there's not really much to scale Finger Sukuna off of, so we enter the next Sukuna, him at 2 fingers. In the detention center, Megumi and Yuji encounter a special grade finger bearer. This cursed spirit was so strong and fast it perception blissed both of them, then blissed Yuji, cutting his arm off before he could even get an attack off. Megumi of course ran away and Yuji tried to stall it until he got far enough to let Sukuna take control. We see the finger bearer let off ridiculous attacks, spitting out cursed energy and creating damage to the vicinity, using barriers to burn straight through Yuji's fingers. All of this, and then he just easily reacts to Yuji's retaliations. But then the dynamic immediately switches as soon as Finger Sukuna appears. His very existence put fear into the cursed spirit. The guy's heart was beating. Do cursed spirits even have hearts? The first thing Sukuna does is use reverse curse technique to heal the fingers Yuji lost earlier. The finger bearer sent a blast at Sukuna in fear, and Sukuna uses RCT again to literally disperse the blast with aura or something. He then blisses the crap out of the finger bearer, smashing his head into the ground then stomping on it, and when the finger bearer tries to retaliate, Sukuna blisses him again. We come back to the fight after a detour and Sukuna literally has the guy on a wall with all of his limbs dismembered. I have no idea why bro did this, but the cursed spirit regenerates and Sukuna tells him he'll show him true Jujutsu sorcery. And so he uses the first domain expansion in the entire series and slices the cursed spirit into 9 pieces. Sukuna meant to slice him into 3, but he was so weak it diced him even worse than intended. The main thing I want to note is that this was an open domain. We see the shrine representing the domain, but no change in scenery. They're still inside the detention center walls. And so a 2-finger Sukuna is able to not only use his domain, but also use the open variant. His physicals are at least 2 perception bliss tiers above Yuji, who's more agile than Maki and stronger than everyone in both schools combined without curse energy. After his fight with the finger bearer, Sukuna gets the finger that he bared and becomes 3-finger Sukuna. 3-finger Sukuna has one fight as well, and it's against Megumi. The first thing he does is perception bliss the crap out of him, appearing behind him even though Megumi was staring at the exit to the detention center. He then handicaps himself by ripping out his own heart, and according to Megumi, it means he has to be hurt regardless of his ability to live without one. They start fighting and we finally see Sukuna's fighting style. I said just a bit ago that Sukuna at 2 fingers was 2 perception bliss levels above Yuji, who was faster than Megumi by a large margin. The funny thing about this is that after Sukuna kills Megumi's snake, he perception blisses him twice. Megumi's looking up at Sukuna, and as he's still looking at where he was, Sukuna is already behind him. Then he throws Megumi into the air and he's looking for where Sukuna is, and again, Sukuna is already behind him. But he gets his attack blocked by Megumi summoning Yue at the last second. This is something Sukuna does throughout the entire series. It's why no one can scale him properly, and the Shinjuku showdown was a whole bunch of BS except for the Gojo fight. After fodderizing Megumi initially, Megumi is about to summon Mahoraga on that boy, and Sukuna instantly gets excited. Let's remind ourselves the state Sukuna is in. He used RCT multiple times, used a domain expansion, he has his heart ripped out, and he's clearly not even going all out. The reason I'm listing these things is because of a statement Sukuna has for himself in Shibuya. After he finds out about Mahoraga's ability to adapt to any and all phenomena, he's about to pop a domain expansion and thinks about what would have happened if Megumi summoned it against him at the detention center. His exact thoughts are that Mahoraga might have been able to beat him then. The implications of this statement are crazy. Either Mahoraga really is a 3-finger Sukuna killer, or Sukuna thinks his adaptation would have been too crazy to deal with considering his condition during the fight. We know that Sukuna has a domain expansion, we know Cleave is stated to fit the requirement to defeat Mahoraga, and we also know he'd be able to use Fuga. The problem lies in the power behind the attacks. I mean, come on, are you saying this domain expansion is the same strength as this domain expansion and this one? Clearly not. So it could have been a problem of Sukuna not being able to finish Mahoraga off, considering he would be toying with it the entire time. I do think a full power and bloodlusted 3-finger Sukuna easily disintegrates Mahoraga, but the context makes it seem like he's a Mahoraga victim. By the way, Mahoraga is less durable than Ryu, Yuta, Yuji, and anyone on that level of durability, so let's be real here. 3-finger Sukuna and the statements he gets don't stop there though. In Shibuya, when Megumi fights Toji, he immediately gets blitzed multiple times, and while getting blitzed, he compares his speed and agility to 3-finger Sukuna. There's been tons of talks about how bogus this statement is, mainly because how could Megumi compare the speed of 2 people he's getting blitzed by? The point is that he can't react to the speed. The thing about it for me though is that the image he refers to is the one where 3-finger Sukuna jumps into the air and is about to hit him with a sledgehammer. That specific scene is one where Sukuna's perception blisses him, but Nui is able to react and block the attack for him. However, he is referring to when Toji threw him outside, and so it low-key wouldn't be too far-fetched to assume that the image is supposed to be the reaction to the throw. Anyways, the overall question at hand is whether or not the comparison between Toji and Sukuna is valid. We'll get to a conclusion when we go over another huge statement for 3-finger Sukuna. When Gojo starts fighting Jogo and realizes that Jogo can fully communicate with him, he's shook. He then just outright says Jogo's probably stronger than the current Sukuna, and that's the statement. So even though the statement is pretty clear cut, there is still a lot of talks about it, so let's get into it. First off, the picture of Sukuna Gojo is thinking of is 1-finger Sukuna, but obviously he wouldn't have an image of 3-finger Sukuna since he wasn't there during the detention center mini arc. There's also ambiguity on whether or not Sukuna or Jogo is stronger from Gojo, and I don't blame him. He knows that Jogo has a domain expansion and packs a hell of a punch, and he knows nothing about Sukuna. This is unironically something consistent in the series where literally no one knows about Sukuna's abilities, but people try to assume his power level. Funnily enough, I have the perfect statement to agree with the notion that Gojo just doesn't have the means to comfortably put Jogo over Sukuna, and it's from Mahito. Mahito, after he got slashed by Sukuna, reflects back on it and said that the Sukuna he saw, 3-finger Sukuna, has less curse energy than Jogo, but his soul was just on another level. I genuinely think that's what happened here. Reminder that unless you train directly with Gojo and he knows all your abilities and capabilities, the only thing he can see to gauge your strength is your curse energy and your curse technique, but it's vague even at that. Also, Gojo can't even see that for Sukuna, he literally just sees the size of his soul from the 6 eyes. Think back to the Goodwill event when Gojo broke the veil and looked at Yuji. He immediately said Yuji got way stronger, and all it was based off, as we saw, was his curse energy manipulation. he hit a black flash and just got a little training from Todo, so of course Gojo can get the entire rundown of his strength. That's all there was to it. Gojo at this point doesn't know about Fuga, doesn't know about his domain expansion, and sure as hell doesn't know it's an open barrier domain. And so yeah, I think that's why there's ambiguity there, but take the information I gave you and hold on to it because we're still not done with the conversation. There was this Q&A Gege held, and one of the questions will be used to talk about 3 Finger Sukuna, but also 5 Finger Sukuna. The question asked if the fact that Jogo fought both Sukuna and Gojo was a way to indirectly compare the strength of both of those characters. Gege responded that it was basically a coincidence, and the fact was, and hear this, the only one who could put up a fight with Sukuna at the moment, 5 Finger Sukuna, was Jogo. And so because he didn't want to drag out the serialization of JJK after Shibuya, he made Yuji eat 10 fingers right there and then so that Sukuna would just outright dominate him. We have a lot to talk about, so let's think about it. First off, I just want to say that I don't think the statement is saying that Toji wouldn't be able to fight Sukuna. Even if the statement was saying that, Toji didn't have his actual arsenal of weapons he would usually use in a fight. He literally just has a broken playful cloud at his disposal, so either way it wouldn't be a terrible statement for him. But also, I think it was pretty clear that Toji was part of the elimination because he has 0 ties to Sukuna. His entire point of being there was to fight Megumi, obviously. However, the elimination in terms of power might actually include Mahito, which is kind of indicative of what you think the rankings of the Disaster Curses really is. But also for him, even though he has ties to Sukuna, his obvious fight was Yuji, so there was no reason for Mahito to fight Sukuna. Jogo literally exists for no reason like Hanami and Dagon, so he just had to die. Alright, going back to the root of the statement though, Jogo is apparently 5 Finger Sukuna level. Everyone remembers that statement of Kenjaku where he glazes Jogo to get him to fight Gojo, and he tells him that he's around 8 to 9 finger level. The fact that he can actually say that puts more merit to this overall claim that he's 5 Finger Sukuna level. The only thing I can actually add to this is the fact that when I translated the Q&A for myself, the other translation said, rather than Jogo being Sukuna level, it's actually only Jogo could fight Sukuna out of process of elimination. Toji is fighting Megumi and has no ties to Sukuna. Kenjaku is obviously not about to fight Sukuna when he wants to use him. Mahito's not about to fight Sukuna because his fight is Yuji and there was literally no one else available. This translation puts it more of a narrative interpretation rather than a power one, and believe it or not, it actually makes sense. The fact that the serialization of JJK after Shibuya is brought up just adds more to the fact that this could be a narrative point. With everything out of the way, where does 3 Finger Sukuna actually scale? On the low end, the guy isn't even stronger than Jogo and also not faster than Toji. On the high end though, he's just on another level compared to at least Jogo because of his actual capabilities. If Jogo fights Sukuna, Sukuna is winning that domain clash. No one knew this, but it is the case, and if he wins a domain clash against you, it's basically GG unless you're Gojo. My personal opinion on 3 Finger Sukuna and onwards until we reach 15 Finger Sukuna is that he's that guy. Honestly, I'm not even going to elaborate further than that. You guys let me know your thoughts on 3 Finger Sukuna in the comments. 15 Finger Sukuna is someone I think is like top tier, but apparently this interpretation of his strength isn't the common consensus, so let's lay out everything on the table. When we first see him, he's so strong that he knows Jogo couldn't land a single hit on him, even if he used a domain expansion. That means, and we see it directly, that their speed isn't even in the same ballpark. 15 Finger Sukuna is also the first one to use Fuga, and the first time he uses it, it was outside of his domain, so Jogo was caught by it because it simply just overpowered his flames. The reason I say this is because in chapter 259 we get an explanation of Fuga and what it really does. Sukuna can only open his furnace doors after preparing his ingredients, clean and dismantle. Despite their absurd firepower, the flames within the furnace lack in both speed and range, so to amend this, Sukuna undertook another binding vow. Outside of his domain, furnace cannot be used on multiple targets. Let's talk about what that means. The first thing that jumps out to me is that outside of his domain, Sukuna will only use Fuga against one target. It's literally stated that this was to amend the limitations of Furnace, and so you can either say it was to boost it in the domain, which is supported, but also the Fuga outside of the domain still suffers from the same limitations. Or you can say that both the in-domain Fuga and the outside domain Fuga are boosted by the binding vow. We don't know if the outside domain Fuga is really boosted, but if it is, the way I see it is that it's like Kashimo's lightning situation, whereas limiting yourself to one target through binding vows means the Fuga undergoes a speed boost and range boost. And the reason I compared it to Kashimo's lightning is because it was basically a sure hit. That obviously doesn't completely apply to Sukuna, but I wouldn't be surprised if the speed of the Fuga felt like a sure hit. Y'all can let me know your interpretation about the outside domain Fuga though, but the point is that these flames literally just one-shot Jogo. Then Sukuna enters a fight with Mahoraga, where Sukuna is literally playing around the entire time. I mean, first off, Sukuna perception blisses the guy pretty casually, taking Haruto away before he could realize he was there. Then Mahoraga makes the first move trying to hit Sukuna with a downward slash, and Sukuna easily reacts to it. Sukuna then sends a dismantle at Mahoraga and it slips right through him, hitting the wall behind him. Mahoraga hits his first adaptation and Sukuna sends another dismantle at him, but this time Mahoraga slaps it away and Sukuna is immediately impressed. Mahoraga at this point can see his slashes unlike anyone before. Mahoraga sends another attack and again, you guessed it, Sukuna easily reacts to it. The reason I'm emphasizing this is because there's this really odd assumption that Mahoraga matches 15 Finger Sukuna in stats at all, and this clearly isn't the case. Anyways, Mahoraga almost fully adapts to Sukuna's slashes at this point, so after Sukuna just outright beats him in hand-to-hand combat, he uses cleave for the first time and it doesn't one-shot him. So Sukuna uses his domain expansion and we get a very telling statement. It describes both of Sukuna's slashes, but the one of note is the explanation of cleave. Cleave can be adjusted depending on the target's toughness and curse energy level to cut them down with one fell swoop. We get more explanation about Sukuna's domain, but you guys already know the gist of it. His domain is open and it can span 200 meters, but against Mahoraga he limited it to 140 meters as to not kill Megumi. Until Malevolent Shrine is gone, it will relentlessly attack all targets within its sure hit effect range. Anyways, as Malevolent Shrine destroys literally everything in the vicinity, Mahoraga is surviving it, and it's because to actually defeat Mahoraga is to slaughter it with a new attack before it can adapt. And according to the narrator, cleave fits the criteria perfectly. This is why I think Sukuna could have definitely one-shot Mahoraga at the beginning of the fight, because even a dismantle had slashes going through him. A cleave literally would have cut him in half multiple times, and that would have been the end of the fight. Anyways, Sukuna sends a Fuga at Mahoraga and it completely obliterates him. That's the end of Sukuna's rampage in Shibuya, but from it comes a ton of talk going forward in the story itself. As for just Shibuya, again we literally see the feats in our face, so I don't think I need to go more in depth for that. So let's get into the aftermath. Chapter 140, Yuta Okosu comes back from Africa and is ordered to execute Yuji. He gets the job done pretty easily and Yuji literally dies, but when he comes back, he tells Yuta that he thinks he can beat 15 Finger Sukuna if he comes out. For some very odd reason, people take this statement at face value, but come on. Yuta doesn't know anything about Sukuna, literally he knows nothing. But also, Yuji knows nothing about Yuta. He doesn't know he has a domain expansion, RCT, a stronger Shikigami, and other curse techniques. Yuji's literally lying to lie. He knows nothing about the matchup. This is what I was referring to earlier when I said it's consistent in the series that Sukuna is severely underestimated by people who have no idea what they're talking about. When there's an absence of knowledge, your judgment means absolutely nothing. This is why, and I say this shamelessly as heck, Maki has zero authority to judge matchups. We get told multiple times Maki knows nothing about sorcery. Heck, she literally gets her butt kicked by her dad because she knows nothing. We get an entire chapter of Maki spouting out BS that everyone is debunking because, again, she knows nothing. But that's besides the point. Again, Yuta versus 15 Finger Sukuna isn't as simple as taking Yuji's word for it. There's a ton of other layers. We fast forward to the fated day when Yorozu revealed herself to have taken over Sumiki's body. Because of this, Megumi's soul shattered and he was completely vulnerable. And so Sukuna knew this was his time to strike. He says in chains to take over Yuji's body, breaks his finger off, and blisses Megumi, force-feeding him a finger and taking over his body. Yujikuna has officially ended, and so now we enter Megkuna's reign. The first thing bro does is bliss the crap out of Yuji and send him flying with one punch. I assume at this point Megumi hadn't been able to recover and start nerfing Sukuna, and so that's why Sukuna's just able to absolutely obliterate him. Sukuna then uses Nue, and the size of it was ridiculous. It took up the entire roof of the building it was on. I mean, just look at the difference between Megumi's Nue and Sukuna's. The difference is pretty obvious here. He uses Nue's lightning to try and get rid of Tagaba and Maki, but that fails as Maki blocks the attack, and Tagaba... well, Tagaba is Tagaba, so he just wasn't affected by it. But suddenly, Nue is disabled, and there was an angel in the sky. Angel's curse technique is to disable all other curse techniques, and so just existing in its vicinity, Nue was sent to the Shadow Realm. Because Sukuna literally just took over Megumi's body, the disparity between their souls wasn't insane, so Jacob's Ladder would have been super effective against Sukuna. And so Angel / Hana does it, letting off a Jacob's Ladder that literally starts cooking Sukuna. It cooks him so badly that Sukuna has to pull out the most desperate measures to stop it from happening again, acting like he's Megumi to bait Hana into stopping. Sukuna does something once that he never does again. He makes his head huge as heck to bite Hana's arm off. I don't know if this was just dramatics, but it was something cool I was always confused about. Anyways, after this happens, Yuji sees Hana get thrown off the building and literally just powers up on the spot. It was so insane in fact that Sukuna is confused on where his strength even came from. Despite this, Sukuna is still able to overwhelm him for the most part, that is, until Sukuna actually tries to slaughter Yuji, and Yuji just walks straight through his slashes. I want to note that Sukuna first thinks that Yuji is the one who's durable enough to survive the attacks, and then he realizes that that's illogical, so his curse energy output should be lower. This means that the nerf Megumi is giving Sukuna is something he couldn't gauge outright, and this is probably because Sukuna almost never goes all out. Sukuna literally should have been able to just bliss and one-shot Yuji the moment he took over Megumi's body, but he didn't even end up killing him. The reason I'm putting emphasis on the fact that Sukuna can't really gauge or sense that he's being nerfed is a topic I never see talked about outside of TikTok. There's an assumption that Sukuna's lack of control of his body and his lowered output does not lead to a nerf in physical capability. I'll lay out everything and then we'll try to come to a conclusion. In chapter 215, Sukuna reviews the impacts of Megumi's nerfs. His curse energy output can't get over 10%, and then he says, take note, that he can still move unhindered. This is another translation thing, so I looked at Lightning's translation and asked ChatGPT to translate it multiple times, and here's what I got. As for Lightning, in context, the interpretation is that Sukuna's curse energy output is nerfed insanely. Of course, the 10% is still there, but as for his physical movement, it's also nerfed, but not as nerfed as his curse energy output. ChatGPT basically said the same thing, and I'm pretty sure everybody can agree that this is very logically the case. If Sukuna doesn't have complete control of his body, and he's literally close to being ripped out, there's no reason to assume everything else is the same except for his curse energy output. It just doesn't make sense. And so please keep that in mind for later because it's definitely an important thing we're going to bring up. Maki joins the fight and Sukuna has to 1v2 both of them while enduring the nerf. They both pull up on him and Maki's able to actually box with him at the first burst, sending him flying. But then Maki says she's going to speed things up and Sukuna's still able to keep up, meaning that the guy still wasn't taking them seriously. He's able to block attacks from both of them at the same time and outmaneuver them to break the ground, then punching Maki in the face. However, Maki tanks it completely and Sukuna compliments her. After this, he and Maki have their own sequence together boxing while jumping through the air. Again, despite the nerf, Sukuna said that he'd be able to comfortably slaughter Yuji, so I don't think Sukuna's going all out here. I personally think that even with the nerf he can blitz the both of them. It's pretty clear to see that he's just super interested in Maki. Anyways, Ryomen comes into the picture with both of them staring at her, and then she just blitzes both of them while Sukuna's easily able to outmaneuver the attack. Honestly, that just further supports what I was saying, to be honest, and yes, this was a blitz. Maki has precognition and it would especially work against Ryomen's ice because she can perceive changes in temperature, but she still got blitzed by the attack. AoE or not, Sukuna got around it easily. You know what that means though. If I speak, I'm in big trouble. Sukuna goes on to take a cursed bath in Megumi's body to sink it in darkness, and then he fights Yorozu, who took over Sumiki's body, Megumi's sister. This was in order to literally kill her with his technique to break his spirit even further, and he does exactly that. But before the fight starts, we have to go over probably the most hilarious thing to exist in the whole Yuta vs 15 Finger Sukuna thing. Sukuna pulls up to Sendai to find Yorozu, and in his path comes Ryu. Mind you, Ryu was just going blow for blow with Yuta. It doesn't matter that Yuta didn't want to kill the other players. Yuta and Ryu are still relative. If that wasn't the case, Yuta would have done him like Gojo did Ryomen, but that very clearly never happened because they were on the same level. Anyways, Sukuna tells bro to move out of the way, and he doesn't. So Sukuna sends a dismantle at him that was, in his own words, meant to slice him in 3. But it doesn't. It actually just ends up being one single slash that doesn't even get through his body like it did to Mahoraga. I don't know how Sukuna's slashes actually work, but it's all a testament to the target's durability, and in Ryu's case, his durability is high. After complimenting Ryu, Sukuna just outright blitzes him and one-shots him. I think it's pretty hilarious that this exists, and 15 Finger Sukuna versus Yuta is still a conversation. In the Yorozu fight though, we see Sukuna use almost all the other Shikigami that Megumi didn't have, like the ox and the deer, but he also uses a new version of Max Elephant, a bigger one that breaks Yorozu's armor. What I found interesting about this, and the fact that he goes on to use Mahoraga, which we'll go back into in a second, is the fact that Sukuna didn't do the ritual for any of these Shikigami. From the moment Sukuna took over Megumi's body to the end of the Yorozu fight, we see almost everything Sukuna does. Nothing significant was off screen. We see Sukuna use Nue to fly to the Zenin warehouse, we see Sukuna dress up and go to Sendai, and then we see the Yorozu fight happen. There is no point where Sukuna would have had the chance to perform the ritual, and so with that being said, I think it's a pretty cool assumption to say that the Shikigami just yielded to Sukuna by default because they know he's that guy. Anyways, when fighting Yorozu, something I've noticed is that Yorozu was actually a testing ground for Mahoraga according to Sukuna, and not, well, Yuta's rival. Say what you will about all of that, but Yorozu was definitely acknowledged by Sukuna, and so he does something that no one in the history of 10 Shadows user has ever done. He used himself as a means to give Mahoraga an adaptation. Let me explain. Mahoraga's ability, of course, is to adapt, and with it, the signal for adaptation is the wheel behind him. However, in Sukuna's case, he summoned the wheel for himself and was slowly taking his from Yorozu to adapt to her construction curse technique. After Yorozu uses her trump card, the perfect sphere, Sukuna gave the adaptation back to Mahoraga, and by then, the adaptation process was complete. So all Mahoraga did was, well, stab it and it was destroyed. And then Mahoraga just one-shots Yorozu. This is actually an ability that Sukuna shows multiple times in different variants during his fight with Gojo, but that fight is like a whole section for itself. Anyways, with the fight over, Yorozu gives Sukuna Kamutoke, something Blood didn't even use until like 20 chapters later, but also Megumi's soul was completely and utterly crushed. He just witnessed himself killing his own sister with his own technique, and it's all because he was too weak to do anything about it. At this point, Sukuna might as well just had the body to himself because Megumi wasn't going to do anything about it and couldn't do anything about it. So we enter the final showing of the 15 Finger Sukuna, the day Gojo was unsealed. Gojo, right out of the prison realm, tells Kenjaku that he should pick his words wisely because they will be his last. After all, everyone agrees Gojo would absolutely slam him. And so Gojo tries to blitz Kenny, and we see Kenny literally unable to react. He's sweating, but there's no reaction symbol. He's literally about to get his stuff boomed. Sukuna intercepts him from literally out of nowhere though. We see their clash creating collateral damage. Either this is Gojo's blue sucking everything in, or just the clash pushing everything away. We see that Kenjaku's just there trying not to die. Then we witness it. Sukuna indeed stopped Gojo's attack on Kenjaku, and Gojo shook that Sukuna is in Megumi's body now. I think this should be confirmation that 15 Finger Sukuna can still box with Gojo. Apparently there's an assumption that Gojo just absolutely stomps that version of Sukuna, but it's pretty clear that's not the case. The outcome of their battle is something I don't even want to put thought into, so I leave that question to you. Anyways, as I said before, this was the last thing 15 Finger Sukuna did, and so he eats the remaining 4 fingers Ryomen could find and eats his past mummified head as compensation for the last finger. I know y'all been waiting for it, final arc Sukuna scaling, but this video is just too long. I'm going to end it right here, but do not worry, I have another Sukuna video dropping next week, and also the final arc Sukuna scaling dropping, well, I don't have an exact date. Just know the second part is going to be as long, if not longer than this one. Since you've gotten this far, I want to let you know that July is the month of Yuta, so I'll be dropping a Yuta version of this, no 2 parts, the entire thing at the beginning of July. and then afterwards I put Yuta into different scenarios, so stay tuned for that. Anyways, I really appreciate you getting this far into the video. Like, honestly, I can't stress this enough. I really appreciate you. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll catch y'all in the next one.